Today, we're going to trace the political journey of one of Israel's most controversial figures, Itamar Ben-Gvir. His story really makes you ask a critical question. How does someone who was once considered too extreme for even the military end up becoming the Minister of National Security? Let's dig into his path from the fringes of politics right into a powerful cabinet position.
So to really get a sense of how far he's come, let's start with where he is right now. He is Israel's Minister of National Security. That means he has direct control over the country's police force and its prison services. Just keep that job title in your head as we rewind the clock and see where he started.
Okay, now contrast that official title with this. This is a quote from a sign he was once convicted for carrying. Expel the Arab enemy. That huge gap between the powerful minister and the radical activist, that's exactly what we're going to explore.
All right, Section 1, a radical beginning. You see, to understand the minister, you first have to meet the activist. Ben-Gvir's political life didn't start in parliament. Nope, it started decades ago, out on the streets. And it was shaped by a really extreme ideology.
This timeline really paints a picture of how early his path was set. Back in the 90s, he was dead set against the Oslo Peace Accords. Those were the big land for peace deals with the Palestinians. He even showed up on TV holding up a hood ornament he'd ripped off of Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin's car just weeks before Rabin was assassinated by another right-wing extremist. Fast forward to 2007, and he had a criminal conviction for supporting a terror group and for inciting racism. I mean, his views were so out there, he was even barred from doing his mandatory service in the Israeli military. So you have to wonder, where did all these views come from? Well, to get Ben-Gvir's politics, you have to understand the person he calls his mentor, the extremist rabbi Meir Kahane. And we're not talking about some casual influence here. This is the very foundation of his ideology. Kahane was the founder of the Kachas Party. Now, this group was so extreme it was eventually banned in Israel itself, and the U.S. designated it a terrorist organization. Its main belief? The forced removal of most Arabs from Israel. So for Ben-Gvir, this isn't just an influence, it's the political tradition he's actively carrying on. And if you want to know just how deep that connection goes, check this out. For years, a portrait of Baruch Goldstein reportedly hung in Ben-Gvir's living room. Goldstein was a Koch supporter who walked into a mosque and murdered 29 Palestinians while they were praying. This shows his alignment wasn't just with an idea, but an open embrace of its most violent figures. All right, Section 3. From courtroom to Knesset. So how does a street activist get a hold of actual power? For Ben-Gvir, the next move was to use the very system he'd been fighting against. He went and got a law degree, basically trading his megaphone for the courtroom. And he quickly built a reputation as the go-to lawyer for Jewish extremists who were charged with violent crimes. His client list included other Kahanist activists and, maybe most notoriously, 2 settlers accused in the horrific Duma arson attack. That's the case where an 18-month-old baby and his parents were burned alive in their own home. All of this high-profile legal work really built up his reputation on the far right. He took that notoriety and channeled it into politics. And in the 2022 elections, his party, Jewish Power, won a surprising number of seats. That made him a crucial piece of the puzzle for Benjamin Netanyahu's coalition government. Just like that, the activist from the fringe became a kingmaker. And that brings us right back to today. So what happens when a lifelong radical is put in charge of the country's police? Well, the policy consequences were immediate and they were dramatic. One of his very first signature moves was to dramatically loosen the rules for getting a gun. And the source material highlights the result. 300,000 new firearm licenses were approved, a lot of them for Israeli settlers living in the occupied West Bank. That is a staggering number, and it points to a massive policy shift right out of the gate. You know, his agenda as a minister is pretty much a direct reflection of what he's believed his entire life. As you can see here, he pushed to loosen the open fire rules for police and soldiers, he tried to make prison conditions even worse for Palestinian prisoners, and he pushed for a really controversial bill to bring back the death penalty. But only for Palestinians convicted of terrorism. So when you look at all of these policies together, you have to ask, right, what's the end game here? What's the ideology that ties all of these moves together? Well, according to the source material, the answer is an agenda that's all about Jewish supremacy and the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians that he considers disloyal to Israel. In short, it's the Kahanist ideology, but now it's being implemented as actual state policy. And he is not subtle about it. During the recent Gaza war, the way he talked as a minister sounded almost exactly like the signs he used to carry as a teenager. He was openly calling for the mass expulsion of Palestinians from the Palestinian territory. The consistency is actually pretty chilling. The message hasn't changed at all, only the platform he has to say it from. Now, as you can probably guess, this agenda hasn't exactly gone unnoticed. The international community has definitely started to respond, and the backlash has been growing. A growing list of nations, and we're talking about key Israeli allies here, has taken the very rare step of putting sanctions directly on Ben-Gvir himself. We're talking about the UK, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and several countries in the EU. This is not just some diplomatic slap on the wrist. This is a direct punitive action. And they're being very clear about why. The source states these sanctions came about because he has been inciting violence against Palestinian people for months and months and months. So the international community is pointing directly at his rhetoric and his actions as a major cause of instability. So what's the big takeaway from all this? According to the source, Ben-Gvir's career is more than just one man's story. It's like a barometer for a huge shift in Israeli politics. A shift where ideas that used to be considered completely fringe are now right at the center of government power. And that leaves us with a really critical question, not just for Israel, but for any democracy. When ideas that were once considered way too extreme for public life get control of the levers of state power, what happens next?